Welcome to Cultic Cube, where we cube religiously. We make you better at cube and make your cube better. Today I'd like to introduce you to my favorite new addition to my legacy cube. Wizards has blessed cube curators with a huge influx of fun new tools in 2018 and 19. But forget all the new card hype, and if you will, take a trip with me back to 2005 to visit the Genju, which are elemental spirits from Betrayers of Kamigawa. Genju are not totally unfamiliar to some peasant cubes, but I hope to convince you that they are suitable for consideration in modern and legacy cubes as well. I doubt they would fare well in powered environments, though. They are incredibly resilient threats, with diverse abilities that can apply pressure quickly. The green and blue Genju are the best of the cycle, followed by the white version. I was persuaded to test the Genju in my legacy cube by my friend SirFunchalot of the MTG Cube Brainstorming Discord server, to which I provide a link in the video description. The cards have entirely lived up to his praise. The Genju make creatures with remarkable staying power. First in the sense that by requiring activation, the creatures that they animate are often able to dodge sorcery speed removal. But moreover, when these enchantments go to the graveyard, they immediately return to one's hand. This makes their animated creatures difficult for the opponent to trade with profitably. It is disheartening to be on the receiving end of a Genju beatdown, knowing that solutions to the problem tend to be temporary. Moreover, most of the Genju have competitive stats, and all of them effectively have haste after the first few turns of the game. These cards operate in an interesting mechanical space. On the one hand, they are similar to creature lands, in that they allow one to pay mana to animate a land. However, they occupy a spell slot in one's deck rather than a mana source, which makes these less desirable than creature lands. Still, as the 5 main Genju each costs 1 CMC, the cost to put them in one's deck is not terribly high. These are also fine top decks later in the game, as the Genju will be able to attack immediately, whereas creature lands typically cannot, and of course some creature lands are even slow to block, as they enter tapped. The Genju may then be less analogous to creature lands than to equipment, vehicles, or auras. You will doubtless already have remarked on these cards' similarity to Rancor in particular. A fine feature of the Genju, though, is that they do not require a board presence in order to cast them. This makes these cards particularly valuable against removal-heavy opponents, and controlling decks packing sweepers. To turn to the individual Genju, I think it is a real toss-up whether the green or the blue one is better, but let us begin with green. This card is excellent in decks that operate, as green decks often do, in a mid-range continuum. Mid-range tends to struggle to recuperate card advantage and momentum when it loses its board, and Genju of the Cedars addresses this problem nicely by refusing to die. I wish the card granted trample. Still, it represents a 4/4 with which one can swing on turn 3. The blue Genju is kind of insane as a fairy conclave that grew up into a snapping drake. Or maybe the better comparison is a Delver of Secrets, who always does what it says on the label. This creature is a great planeswalker assassin, and it is comparable to Creeping Tar Pit, but is easier to activate. Blue does not often get access to haste, which increases the value of this card, and even if an opponent knows that one has the card in hand, then they have to play around 3 hasty power in the air. The white Genju has a defensive body and ability, which is slightly disappointing to me, as White Weenie is more starved for the sort of recursion offered by a Genju than is Control. But Control really does love this card. Wall of Omens is probably still a better brick wall for aggro, since one casts it and forgets it. However, Genju of the Fields has one more point of toughness, and it has power enough to eat many cheap attackers. One can easily threaten a defensive activation with it while holding up an instant, and this card has lifelink before the ability was keyworded. Thus the card not only makes racing difficult for aggressive decks, but when one has mana to burn, one may activate it multiple times. 4 mana buys double life gain, 6 mana buys triple, and so on. Genju of the Spires hits undeniably hard. I found in my brief stint with the card that it is often too easy for opponents to chump the creature. Of course, Red appreciates the card advantage inherent in Genju, and simply abyssing the opponent may be an effect worth continuing to pay for, though the cost also includes stone raining oneself. Nevertheless, aggressive red decks prefer their 1-drops to just turn sideways without any additional investment. Note that the card blocks well, as it will happily trade up with a Titan. The black Genju has the worst stats of the bunch, no evasion, and a shade ability. I dislike shades for their mana and color commitment. Genju of the Fens is certainly better in cubes that have robust support for black aggro, as well as those that go in for devotion and mono-black control. For my purposes, though, this Genju trails its brethren in power level. For the sake of completionism, let us take a glance at the 6th member of the cycle, Genju of the Realm. This is not a cube card as far as I'm concerned. I do not even cube Progenitus, who at least has the virtue of being found by natural order, unlike the Rainbow Genju. If you look at top left, you will find a link to a playlist of videos on related topics, beginning with a survey of creature lands for cube and continuing through examinations of vehicles and underrepresented equipment. Let's keep hanging out and chatting cube.